What's up, friends? Dan Vega here, and today we're going to take a look at Netlify Serverless Functions. So I've been doing a lot more streaming lately. If you want to go ahead and follow me, I'll put a link below to my Twitch account and my YouTube account if you're not already subscribed. But I've been streaming a lot more lately, and one of the things that I want to do is I want to get a schedule of when I'm going to be presenting, whether that's a live stream or a conference or a user group, and I want to put it on my website so that you have access to that. This is a statically generated website using Vue and Gridsome. And so I could connect the Notion API to that website, but then what would happen is I'd have to basically rebuild the site every time the Notion API or the Notion document got updated. I could also come in here and manually update that every time I want, but I use Notion for everything. And so I'd like one place to go ahead and keep that schedule. And then I want to display it here on my website. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to build just kind of a simplified version of that. Again, if you've been following me on the streams, we've been doing that this week. But what we're going to do is end up with something like this. This is the Notion page or the Notion database that we're going to use. It just has two streams in it. It has a title, a start date, an end date, a URL, and some tags or categories of what that stream is going to be about. And what we'll do is we'll create a brand new app. I don't want to kind of muddy the waters with having to use my website. I want you to be able to follow along. So we're going to create a new application. We're going to do that by using Vite, and we're going to use Vue 3. But the great thing about Vite, it's such a fantastic build tool, and it's framework agnostic. So if you wanted to do this in vanilla JavaScript or React or Svelte or whatever you wanted to use, you can go ahead and use Vite for that. So we'll end up with a page that looks like this. Nothing terribly exciting, but what this is going to do is it's going to load up and it's going to call a serverless function that we're going to create. And what we'll do is we'll go and pull all of the streams back, and then in Vue we're using two computed properties to say, well, which streams are upcoming and which ones have already happened, so that those are kind of the archived ones. So if that sounds interesting, and I mean, how could it not? Stick around and we'll start building it right now. All right, so here we are in Visual Studio Code, and we're going to create a new project using Vite. Again, I'll leave a link in the description below over to vitejs.dev. You can find out more about Vite there. Again, just a framework agnostic build tool to get us up and running real quick with a simple Vue 3 application. So we're going to type npm create Vite at latest, and we'll let that run. And we got to give it a project name, so we'll say live stream schedule. And we're going to choose Vue. Again, you can choose whatever you'd like. We're going to use Vue without TypeScript. We're going to cd into live stream schedule. We're going to run npm install. And then that should be everything we need. So this is extremely lightweight. You see it installs really quickly, and we are ready to go. So let's go ahead and open that folder up in code. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to go into source components. We're going to delete this hello world component. And then in app.vue, we're just going to kind of get rid of everything here. I'm going to start with a template and a script setup for Vue 3, and that should give us everything we need to get up and running. So we have that, we have our main.js, and then that's really all we need. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to create a new file called netlify.toml. Again, if this is your first time creating serverless functions with Netlify, I don't want to keep going through this because I've already went through this on some other videos. So I'm just going to breeze through this, but there is documentation on this. They have really good documentation. And so if you want to read through it, I'll try and leave a link to that, a link in the description below to that. So really what we're doing with this is we're saying, here's a configuration file for Netlify. And what we're defining here is for our serverless functions, where is that directory? So we're going to say that directory is going to be in a directory called functions, and that's really all we need. So now we can create that directory. We'll call it functions, and now we have a directory. Now anything inside this directory, Netlify will go ahead and create a serverless function with the name of that file, and it will go ahead and package that up. And what happens is it actually deploys it on AWS Lambda for us. So this is not something that you couldn't just do yourself, but this just makes it so much easier. So we're going to create a new file called streams.js, and this is where the code is going to be for creating what we're trying to do here is connect to Notion and pull down that content that you saw that was in that Notion database earlier. All right, so we're back here in the browser, and if you look at the Notion API documentation, there's a really good getting started guide here. And one of the things that you'll find in here is there is a JavaScript client. So there's an SDK for using the Notion API, which makes everything a lot easier. So the first thing that we're going to do is just install the Notion HQ client. And again, if you want to read through this documentation, you can. I've created a bunch of videos around this. We've done this in Nuxt. I'm going to do this in the future in Java and Spring. So if you're interested in that, let me know. But again, pretty easy to go through. We're going to build this out. So the first thing we need to do is install that client. We're going to go ahead and run that command npm install @notionhq/client. And that is installed. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and say const client is equal to require, and then we'll say @notionhq/client, and that's that. So this is a serverless function. Again, if we went into the documentation, they'd give you kind of the default handler function of what it looks like. So all it's going to do is it's exports.handler, and this is going to be an async function, and it's going to give us the event and the context. And I do want to actually jump back to the documentation just for a second so you can see what is available in that. So here I am in the Netlify docs in the serverless functions overview. So if you go into build with JavaScript, it talks about, hey, if you create a function in that function folder called hello, we'll go ahead and serve up a serverless function called hello. So it basically gives you an endpoint. So you'll see the default kind of handler, what an async function looks like. If you go in here, it says, okay, the event and the context will be parameters that are passed to that handler function. And you get some an event with the following. So you have like the path, the HTTP method. So if you want to differentiate between, say, a get and a post, any headers that are coming through, query string, the body. So if it is a post, you want to get access to the body, and then whether or not it's base64 encoded. So I just want to show you that because that's the kind of information that you'll get back. And then again, there's just more examples in here of building out a handler function. So let's jump back into the code. And with that, we can start to build this out. So what we need to do is we need to say const notion is equal to, and we're going to create a new client. Now that client takes an auth key. So this is the auth key that we need. That is not the actual auth key, but we'll take a look at this in a second. So the auth key is coming from from the Notion API. When you set up a Notion API, there's something called an integration. So back in the Notion documentation, you'll see the My Integrations over here. This is where you set up a new integration. From here, you'll get the API key. Again, I've mentioned this in other videos, but that is one of the steps. The other step is back here in Notion, you need to make sure you're sharing that database with whatever integration that you've created. So I've kind of done all that already. Again, don't want to cover everything. So you have to set up the integration, you get that API key. All right, so back here in Visual Studio Code, we need a way to kind of put that secret key here into this file without actually using that secret key in this file, because again, you don't want to do that. If you end up pushing this to GitHub, it's going to be exposed for anyone to go ahead and grab. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file here called .env, and this stands for .environment. So this is a place where you can add environment variables. So if we wanted to, we can add something like Notion API key and Notion database ID, and these are the actual values. So you want to put these values in here. So your secret key and then your database ID, which we'll talk about in a second. These can go in this environment variables file, and then we can refer to them in our serverless function. Then what happens when you deploy to Netlify, you can replace those using environment variables in Netlify's settings, so those actual keys will be used. So this file does not get checked into Git. This is just going to work here locally. So what I'm going to do is stop this, add these in, and then we'll go back to streams.js. Okay, so now that those are in there, now I can go ahead and actually use those. So I can say process.env dot, and then the name of the key that we created. So we created Notion API key that is being used. Okay, so now that we have access to the client, we need to get the database. So we're gonna go ahead and say a database is equal to, and we're gonna use Notion dot databases. Again, this is in the client SDK documentation, and we're going to query that database for all the rows. I would advise, again, I've kind of stated this before, I would advise going in and playing around with the API and using some type of API tool, something like Postman, just getting familiar with how the different methods that you can call. The normal database get will just kind of get you information about the database. This database query is what will get you all the rows from that database, and that's really what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and query, and then it needs a database ID. So if we go back to the browser and we look at this, this is the database that we're trying to get. But if you look up here, there is a ID in here, and this is the database ID. This is the one that I put into that environment variables file, and that's the database that we care about. So back over to code, I'm going to go ahead and use that, and we're going to say the database ID is equal to Notion, or I'm sorry, we need it from process.env.database ID. So that gives us what we need there. Now that we have the database, we need one more thing. We're going to go ahead and set up an array called streams, and this is going to be an empty array. And we're going to use the results from the database and populate this array with new streams. And to do that, we're going to say database.results.map. And for each row, we're going to create a new stream. So each stream has a bunch of properties, right? Like something like an ID, a title, a start date, an end date, and so on. So these are a bunch of properties. Now, again, this is where jumping into something like Postman and taking a look at the data that comes back will really help you kind of visualize what this is going to look like. There is a lot of data in the Notion API call. So when we get that back, it's not just a simple like, hey, what's the value of title? Because there's so much you could do in Notion to customize it. So the data that you get back is a little convoluted. There's a lot there. So I'm going to paste this in here and kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. So we have our ID that just comes back from the row as ID. We have a title. So you can see each row has properties. The properties that we care about are the same ones coming from our Notion database, are things like title, start date, end date, URL, and tags. And so this is kind of what this looks like. Now, inside of this, we need to do one more thing. We are going to return something. So we're going to return a status code of 200. Everything is okay. And then we're going to return a body, which is the JSON stringify of streams. So that should be all we need to get everything up and running. So we're going to save this, and we're going to go back to app.view. Now in app.view, let's start with a couple things. So I'm going to start with just an H1, and we'll call this live stream schedule. And what we're going to do is just have some text in here. So I'm going to copy this text in here so we don't bore and watching. So this is our list of our upcoming and past live coding sessions. If you'd like to see me talk on a particular subject, please reach out to me on Twitter. So then what we'll have is we'll have an H2, which is upcoming streams, and we'll have the same thing for archived streams. So archived, And so now what we need to do is we need to go out to our serverless function and get all of that data and display it here. So how are we going to do that? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called streams. It's going to be a ref, and it's going to be an empty array. I don't know why this is no longer importing stuff for me. Come on, VS Code. So I'm going to import ref from view. So now I have an empty array that is going to be reactive. So as it changes, it will update in our template. So the next thing we need is an on-mounted lifecycle hook. So in here, we are basically going to call out to our serverless function. So we're going to do that using our fetch API. And again, back in the documentation, every serverless function is kind of placed into Netlify and then the name of the directory. So in our case, functions, and the name of the serverless function is called streams. So once we get that back, then we're going to go ahead and get the response. We're going to take that response and turn it into JSON. And then we're going to take our data, and we're going to take our data and what do we need? We need the streams. So streams.value, because again, that's using ref, is going to be equal to data. I think that is all we need in our unmounted lifecycle hook. So let's start there. That should get us back what we need. Let's go ahead and just console.log streams.value. Okay, so now to run this, so you might be thinking just, okay, if you look in the package.json, if you're new here and you want to run a script, you could run npm run dev, and that'll load up Vite in development mode. But that won't let you test your serverless function, right? So again, back from the documentation, you can install the Netlify CLI. And if you run Netlify dev, this is going to do a couple of things. So if we look, it is basically run and injected our env file. So we have our Notion, or we have our environment variables for our API key and our database ID. We loaded the function streams. So now you could see that streams function, the serverless function that we created, is running here. A function server is running for us, and then it goes through and it starts up Vite. And so Vite is run, and now everything is ready to go. So everything is on localhost 8888. So let's head over to the browser and take a look at that. All right, so again, we're not seeing anything. There isn't anything to see here. Although we should see our normal app.view, unless that's just loaded on 3000. Let's check that out. Okay, that is an easy fix. All right, so we need to fix something here. Unmounted was not loaded. There you go. This used to do this for me. I don't know what's going on. All right, let's go back to the browser, and now we see that everything looks okay. We're not getting the JSON though, so something's going on there. Now we should be on 8888. Okay, and something is happening with the JSON, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so I stopped and did a little debugging. First off, we needed a wait here, and I think this is wrong. This should be Notion database ID. Let's see if that works. So we're gonna run Netlify dev again. We'll see if we don't get any errors. Everything looks okay. Let's head back to the browser. And okay, so if you look down here, we're logging a couple things out. There's an array of 2. There are 2 items, our 2 live streams that are coming from Notion. So far, so good. So let's head back to code and kind of finish this off. So this works. What I want to do here in template is I'm going to create a new component. I'm going to call this new component live stream table.view. And just to cut down on some time, I'm going to go ahead and paste in this component and we'll talk through it real quick. It's just a simple table. It has a title, start date, and end date tags. And then in the body, we iterate stream in streams. We'll look at streams in a second. But we take the ID as the identifier, and then we just output the title, the start date, the end date, and the tags. So if we look at this, the props that get passed into here for streams is an array. So let's go ahead and save that. So now we're doing that because we don't want to duplicate our efforts here and have to create that table twice. So what we need to do is we can say live stream table, and then the props streams is going to be equal to streams. And again, we're going to do this twice and then kind of fix this. We'll talk about that. So if I save that, and let me just double check. This looks good. One more thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to import that. So let's say import a live stream table from source components components. Sorry, live stream table.view. So that should be okay now. Let's go ahead and nullify dev. And if we head back over to the browser, we can see that our streams are both being displayed under upcoming and archive streams. So one last fix to this, again, is going to be, let's clear this out and close this just for a second. So we need a different representation of this data, right? Like we want upcoming streams and archive streams. And we've already gotten all the streams. We just really need to kind of filter those out. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create two computed properties. So we're going to say const upcoming streams is equal to this is a computed, and this is going to return. So we have our streams, right? And we want to get the value, and then we're going to filter on that. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that filter to say, hey, I want to create a data object from that stream.startDate. And what I want is that date greater than or equal to today? If it's greater than or equal to today, that is an upcoming stream, right? Now we can do the same for archive streams. So archived streams, but the only difference is this will be less than today. So if the start date was less than today, that is a past stream. So now instead of passing those in here, we're going to use those computed properties. So I'm going to say upcoming streams, and I'm going to say archive streams. So that should be all we need. I'm going to go ahead and run nullify dev. And one more thing, again, I'm not getting this. I need that there. So now if we head back to the browser, we should see that we have one upcoming stream and we have one archived stream. So the archived one, the date is less than today. In the upcoming, the date is greater than today. So cool. That is really all we needed to do to make this work. And I guess there's one more component to this. What you could do is you go ahead and push this up to a GitHub repo. And once you do that, you can then go ahead and deploy this on Netlify. And because we use that Netlify.toml, that is kind of directing Netlify and saying, hey, these are where my functions are located. It knows how to handle those. So I'm going to show you just the version that I deployed onto Netlify. I have this live stream schedule. If we go ahead and look at this, there is the live stream schedule, and this is pulling data right from Notion. So now as I go and update data here, so let's go ahead and add a new tag, and we'll just say maybe we're talking about Java on this day as well. Now I'm going to come back to this, and I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this page, and now you can see our tags were updated here. So this is pulling live from our Notion data. So pretty cool to see. Again, I think I could have went into a little bit more detail on each of these, but then this would be a very, very long video. So I hope this was helpful. If you have anything specific about some of the things we kind of just jumped over, the Netlify serverless documentation is really good. Jump into that. But if you have questions on that, please let me know in the comments below. Please reach out to me. If you want to see more videos like this or something similar but a little different, just let me know. I love putting together stuff like this, and I'd be happy to put something together. So with that, I think that's where we'll end it today. As always, you will find all of the links below in the description. I'll go ahead and put a link to the source code for this particular repo that we worked on today, and you should be able to find everything there. So with that, please, 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 if this video helped you out and you found value in it, please go ahead and leave me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and as always, friends, happy coding.